It's customary for a church to give the pastor a gift on the occasion of their installation when they become the settled pastor of a church. And when I was installed as the pastor of Cathedral of Hope and Church of the Open Arms last April 2016 on Earth Day Sunday, I was given several thoughtful gifts. And one of those gifts is this beautiful banner that hangs in our sanctuary. I had wanted one for a long time, and lo and behold, it came to us. It is the Be the Church banner, and this is a message that's part of our denomination, the United Church of Christ. It's been around for a little bit. I got curious this week and wondered, how long has this Be the Church motto been part of our larger denomination? So I started scrolling through social media posts for several years back, and I found out that the first time that this was a thing was in August of 2014. It was uploaded to the cover photo of our National United Church of Christ Facebook page. And it had those 9 value statements right under it, which are going to be our sermon series for the rest of the 9 weeks for our summer. When this cover photo was uploaded to the Facebook page, it received 1.6 thousand likes and 2,216 shares. And it was created by a woman named Marche Greer, who's the digital content manager at our national office. It was wildly popular and has become beloved to many churches, and that's why we are going to be studying it for this summer. Our reading today that we heard from the book of Leviticus is not usually preached upon. It is not contained in the 3-year lectionary rotation cycle, but it is the 3rd book of our Bible, of the Hebrew Testament, and it was written to the people of Israel. Most of the chapters contain God's words and discourses to Moses, as he is directed to pass these words along to the Israelites. In this book, God teaches the Israelites and the priests how to make offerings in the tabernacle and how to conduct themselves while camped around the holy tent sanctuary. The instructions in Leviticus emphasize ritual and legal and moral practices, but not so much what people are supposed to believe. In the 25th chapter that we heard from today, it lays out the specifics for what is known as the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year. So every 7 years, the Israelites were to observe a year of Sabbath, just as the people and the animals received a Sabbath every 7 days. The land was supposed to receive a Sabbath every 7 years. They were to let the land lie fallow of all agricultural activity, including plowing and planting and pruning and harvesting. But any fruits that grew of their own accord could be picked by anyone. After 7 cycles of this 7-year tradition, so 7 times 7 is 49, so after 49 years, on the 50th year, it was supposed to be a Jubilee year. During the 50th year, slaves and prisoners would be freed, and debts would be forgiven. The biblical rules containing the sabbatical years are still observed by many religious Jews in Israel, but the regulations for the Jubilee year have not been observed for many hundreds of years. According to the Torah, observance of Jubilee only applies when the Jewish people live in the land of Israel according to their tribes. When I read our text for today, I couldn't help but notice the environmental wisdom that was woven into the Sabbath year by letting the land lie fallow for a season. Farmers, for a long time now, have practiced crop rotation. They divide the land into 2 or more sections, and they rotate what is planted each year in each section so as to not continually deplete the same nutrients from the soil. And this way, a portion of the land can also rest for a time when nothing is planted in it. We don't always think of the land as a living being, as we do humans and animals, but Chief Seattle, from our first reading today, urges us to see things a little bit differently. He says, "Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, every humming insect, We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. Protecting the environment is written into the laws of our religious traditions. For this reason, the larger United Church of Christ has been concerned about creation care for a long time, and especially in more recent years, when it seems that the majority of humans' actions do the opposite of protecting the environment. The current structure of our denomination, the United Church of Christ, came to be the way it is now 50 years ago. So we're having a 50-year celebration this year, 2017. We came together in the current structure in 1957. And ever since then, we've had an every other year business meeting of all the UCC churches in the United States. It's known as General Synod. Eric Kendall just came back from Baltimore last week. He went on behalf of all the churches in Oklahoma, representing us at this wonderful time when we passed some important resolutions for our larger church. The first environmental resolution that was passed by our larger denomination happened in 1959, just 2 years after we restructured in the current way that we are today. That resolution in 1959 called for conservation and development of the Earth's resources for the benefit of all people now and in the future. And that future is now. Several more resolutions have passed throughout the every other year General Synod, but one of the most important documents that has come from our larger church happened in 1987. 5 years before this very important document was created was 1982, and it happened by Dr. Benjamin Chavez Jr., who was the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice leader, and he led several protests in North Carolina's predominantly low-income and African-American Warren County. He was protesting against a landfill for PCB-contaminated soils. I didn't know what PCB was. I had to look that up. And I learned that PCB production was banned in the U.S. by Congress in 1979. It's an element that is so poisonous that it causes cancer in animals and in humans. So they wanted to put a landfill in North Carolina with this PCB-contaminated soil, and many protests erupted around this. There was over 500 people that were arrested during these protests, and sadly, the landfill came to be. But what happened is that it sparked this big movement about environmental racism, and that term was coined during these protests. What people discovered during this event was that persons were trying to put such landfills in communities of color. They didn't want these pollution places to be in their communities, but they didn't mind so much if it was in communities that they didn't live in. Then 5 years later, in 1987, the UCC Commission on Racial Justice published a landmark document entitled Toxic Waste and Race, a groundbreaking study revealing that people of color bear a disproportionate burden of environmental pollution across the United States. The study confirmed a report that looked at the racial and economic makeup of communities where landfills and incinerators and deep well injections were situated. The report found that in the southeast United States, African Americans comprised a majority of the population in 3 of the 4 areas where these sites were located. This publication went on to help the 1991 Principles of Environmental Justice, which have guided the environmental justice thinking and policy since their inception. So we have been a major important part of this call towards environmental justice. Last Monday, on July 3rd, at the 2017 General Synod, a resolution was passed that calls on clergy across the life of the church to preach about the moral obligation to protect God's creation, and this resolution appeals to members to lead efforts to educate and advocate for legislation to reduce the human impact on the environment. The resolution, I liked the name of it, it was called The earth is the Lord's, not ours to wreck. And it passed by more than 97% in favor. This resolution that was passed by our whole denomination first was passed last month in June by the Southern California-Nevada Conference, and they passed it in response to the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. The resolution calls on clergy, churches, and members to speak from the pulpit and in the public square to set an example through our words and our actions. 2 years after this Be the Church wonderful motto came to be, our national church started a 9-month contest in which churches could write in to share how they were being the church in each of these 9 value ways. Last year, outside of this building, there was vegetable gardens that were planted, and it was advertised that the vegetables could be taken or picked or eaten by anyone that visits the food pantry in this building or by anyone in the neighborhood. We wrote in to tell about that way that we are trying to protect the environment. We didn't win, but a lot of other churches wrote in, and the one that won that one was a small church in Oregon, and they were recognized for their rain garden and their native hedgerow that they created. The church is called Clackamas United Church of Christ in Milwaukee, Oregon, and they have been long committed to using earth-friendly products, to recycling, which we also do here at our church, reducing their use of paper products, eliminating pesticides, and planting native species on church property. So in 2013, members and community volunteers installed a large rain garden, and they removed this hedge that they had that was very hard to manage, and it was not native, and they planted all native kinds of species. They got a grant from the local water conservation district to help them do this, and they didn't stop there. What they did, which is just wonderful, after they made all the changes in their church community, they held forums and invited the neighborhood and the larger community to come and learn what they did and how they did it. And they taught people how to do what they did. So they spread it even further. And then persons in the neighborhood started doing rain gardens and planting native species. So they kept it going. Our larger denomination has recently put out a Be the Church mission planning guide. It was released a few months ago. It's 36 pages long. I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw it, and I opened up the PDF and I was scrolling, and I stopped because our picture was there in this national publication. It was a picture I had taken last summer of our youth group as we were in an airport at 3 o'clock in the morning, so you know we looked nice in the picture. We were going to the National Youth Event, and we snapped a picture on our way there, and there was our picture. And I thought, I want to read more about this Be the Church Mission Planning Guide. What I learned from that was it was a document that helps churches evaluate how we are doing for all 9 of these value statements. So there was 54 questions in the survey, and folks were to take the survey, and it would tell us the things that we're doing really good at and the things that we could grow and do better at. So what I did is I went through the survey and I pulled out the 6 questions that have to do about protecting the environment. And on the next slide, you'll see they kind of did a strongly agree, feel neutral about, disagree, strongly disagree. I don't know what you call that, but that's how you grade yourself. So I have the 6 questions for us to take a look at. And some of these we can think about personally in our own lives, and some of them we can reflect on in our larger church. And so that's my hope, is I'm going to read through these 6 questions, give you a second to think about it, and then we can actually have a dialogue and a conversation, remembering the things that we do and thinking and discussing the things that we could be doing. So we'll spend just a few moments on each question. The first question says, congregants have made tangible changes in their personal lives to reduce their environmental impact. And so as you think about this question, do you strongly agree with it? Agree? Feel neutral? disagree, or strongly disagree? Go. Thank you. Who said something? So what is your answer to this question, if you would share it out loud? How do you feel that our congregation members fare with this question? Yeah. Neutral because you don't know how we all do regarding this question. It's a fair answer. Individuals in this congregation, how do you think that we do about protecting the environment in this way? Are there any that do specific things that you can think about in your own personal life? You are part of this community, but are there things that you'd be willing to share that you do that would be helpful to protect the environment? Both Jay, Eric, and Don have said that in your own homes you do recycling. If you didn't already know, here at the church we also recycle. We've got paper recycling for your bulletins and any other paper. Right out underneath in the lobby, there's a wicker basket. And then in the community hall, we have a plastic bin that we can recycle all our plasticware and glass and aluminum. Any other answers for this question? Yes?
I think on storm drains, like the storm grates.
Cleaning out storm drains and grates. That's a wonderful way.
So like the water runoff is clean.
The water runoff is important. That's a wonderful way. Our next, oh, Anna, go for it. Reuse. Your pastor prints her sermon on reused paper, so I always have to check it, but I never use clean paper. I always print on the other side of paper that other people have put into the recycling bin. Nancy.
I have a compost.
Compost.
My drive to the garden, organic and less pesticides.
Safe pesticides. I have heard so much about how much food waste we put into our landfills that could be going back to the earth and making it healthy for all of us. Yes?
Just visiting other cities, I mean, we as a congregation could kind of put some more pressure on our city to, I mean, we get these little tiny little baskets for recycle. And just when we were in San Francisco, you know, they've got great big trash barrels, one for recycle, one for compost, one, you know, all different color coded, you know, so.
We could advocate.
We could pressure our city to do a lot more too.
Thank you, Mom.
Well, in New Jersey, they make you recycle.
We could ask for our city to make us recycle. All right, we're going to go on to our next question, which is, our congregation has woven into our theology, worship, and education a concern for creation, as well as environmental harms that often adversely impact poor communities, communities of color, and our global neighbors. How do you think we do with that? Anna says that we try to do it and that it is preached about from the pulpit. We have songs, music that's woven into our worship service to help us soak that message in on a deeper level. That's true. Thank you, Gabriel. I'm sure on each one of these, there's much more that we could do, but it's important to celebrate what we already do and to brainstorm what we could be doing. Our next question is, our congregation has participated in environmental activities in our local community, such as cleanup days, recycling days, tree planting, climate marches, etc. That's right. We did help with the letter carriers food drive, which we might talk a little bit more about next week in caring for the poor. That's very true. This year we had planned, but we had to cancel a cleanup day that was scheduled for our youth group. It was a citywide event called Litter Bit Better, make every place a little bit better, and we could go and get free gloves and trash bags, and the youth group was going to help clean up that area right behind our dumpsters that's just full of litter. But it rained profusely on that day, and so we didn't get to do it. But I hope we do it next year. We also heavily advertised the climate march for Oklahoma City this year. But wouldn't you know, the climate was affected by global warming, and we could not have the climate march this year. So that is something that we had planned to do. Adverse weather. Anna went to the climate march in Washington, D.C. On Earth Day. Thank you for doing that. Amen. We appreciate that.
And we did have cards we could send to our congressman, but I can sell it, so.
We had postcards printed out that we could send to our legislative representatives to advocate for these important things. Thank you, David. Our next question is, our congregation has engaged in efforts to green the programming of our church and consciously sought to consider and implement best practices, such as installing solar panels, conducting an energy audit, planting a community garden, etc. So we are in a very different situation because we rent this space in this building. It's not our building that we own. So we can't necessarily do many of these things, but what did we install in this place? LED lighting, which has been helpful to all in the building, and that's something that we did. So all of these lights were installed by the people of Hope, and that is very environmental. Yep. There was an energy audit from Church of the Open Arms several years ago. That's true. One thing that we do as a church is we pay attention to the thermostats. And so we turn them on when we're here and we turn them off when we leave. The next question, I think there's two more. Congregants have committed to engaging in individual actions around caring for creation and those impacted by environmental harms. For example, calling our representatives regularly, writing environmental op-eds for the local newspaper, etc. David, that kind of speaks to what you mentioned about writing in the postcards to our legislative representatives. Are there any other things that you can think of that we've done in the past or that we could be doing in this area? Maybe this one is a growing edge for us, something that we can look forward to doing more in the future. The final question is, our congregation has partnered with other congregations or local nonprofits on activities or initiatives around caring for creation and those impacted by environmental harms. How are we doing so far now?
We should be working with other congregations like Mayflower. How many other churches are right here in Southern Park with Nature? We don't even speak to.
We could be partnering more. So this is something that I hope we will keep in our minds as we move forward. We have 9 value statements, and I think what we're going to find over the next 9 weeks is that we are stronger in some areas than others, which is totally normal and is the purpose of the survey. So no church is going to be 100% on every value, but raising these questions does help us to get the ball rolling as far as thinking about in our hearts and minds what we do and what we could be doing, both as individuals and as a church, because it's important to care for God's creation. We hear that echoed in the scriptures. We hear it echoed in our first reading from Chief Seattle, who reminded us that we did not weave the web of life, but we're merely a strand in it. And whatever we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. So if you had any new ideas today, I hope that you won't just let them float away, but that you will keep them and share them and allow us to work on them together. May it be so.